In a small village in Kujia, where life was simple and everyone knew everybody, there was a beautiful and kind-hearted young girl named Amara. Amara lived with her father Okonkwo in a small mud brick house. Her mother had died the moment Amara took her first breath, bleeding out on a mat while the village midwife tried desperately to save her. Okonkwo was left alone with a tiny baby, his heart broken but determined. Every morning before sunrise, Amara would wake up and help her papa. She was only 15, but she worked harder than most grown-ups in the village. She ran errands and fetched water for the old women, carrying heavy clay pots on her head, walking long distance to the stream. The people loved her so much. Her father, Okonkwo, he worked tirelessly to give her the best life their small village could offer. He was a trader known for selling rare spices that were highly sought after, and people traveled from the city to buy from him. Though he was poor, he made sure Amara never felt the lack of a mother, showering her with affection and sacrificing his own needs to make her happy. One day, Amara watched her father skip his only meal to buy her a new school uniform. "Your dreams matter more than my hunger," he said with a smile. Moments like this shaped their bond, making Okonkwo both a father and a hero in Amara's eyes. Every evening, Amara and her father sat outside under the moonlight, talking about life. "Papa, one day I will live in a big house in the city, wear fancy clothes, and attend a school with shiny floors," Amara would say, her eyes sparkling with hope. Okonkwo, though proud of her dreams, was worried. "Amara, the city is not all glitter. Never forget where you come from." Little did he know the sorrow that was waiting for him. Okonkwo sacrificed endlessly for Amara. He walked long distance to the big market in the neighboring village to trade spices and saved every naira to buy her school books and clothes. On her birthdays, he cooked her favorite meal, even when it meant skipping his own. His love for her was boundless. One fateful afternoon, as Okonkwo was arranging spices in his small shop, a black luxury car pulled up, its polished surface gleaming under the sun. A woman stepped out, dressed in a flowing kaftan, her gold jewelry glinting in the sunlight. Her name was Mrs. Eno, a wealthy Lagos businesswoman who had heard of Okonkwo's rare spices. Mrs. Eno was elegant, with an air of wealth and authority, her aura commanding respect. Amara, standing nearby, watched in awe. She had never seen such elegance. Quickly, she grabbed a basket of spices and rushed toward the woman. "Good afternoon, Ma," she greeted, her voice cheerful and polite. "Welcome to my papa's shop." Mrs. Eno smiled, charmed by Amara's warmth. "Thank you, my dear. What's your name?" "Amara," she replied, her smile broadening. "You look like you're from the city." "I am," Mrs. Eno said, laughing. "And you?" "I've never left this village," Amara admitted. "But one day I want to live in the city too." Mrs. Eno's smile widened. She liked the girl's confidence and charm. "The city is a big place, my dear, but you would love it and fit right in," Mrs. Eno replied, amused by the girl's enthusiasm. Amara's eyes lit up. "I want to live in the city one day and go to a big, beautiful school with shiny floors." Amara was exceptionally smart and intelligent. Mrs. Eno chuckled. Intrigued by the girl's ambition, she could see her potentials. Mrs. Eno smiled, and an idea began to form in her mind. Over time, as she became a regular customer, she grew fond of Amara. Amara's bright smile and sharp mind had endeared her to Mrs. Eno, and she often found herself looking forward to her interactions with Amara. She was such a breath of fresh air. She showed Mrs. Eno how the spices were made and even taught her how to use them well. Mrs. Eno was deeply moved by her intelligence and hard work. One day when she came to buy spices, as she was talking to Amara, she reached out and gently took Amara's hands. "Amara, how do you feel if we helped you with your education in the city? I see so much potential in you, and we want to help you achieve your dreams in a better school in the city." Amara's eyes widened in disbelief. "You will do that for me?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Yes, I will, if it's okay with your father." Amara ran over to her father and told him of the news. Mrs. Eno walked over to Okonkwo and made an offer to Okonkwo. "Your daughter has so much potential, and I want to take her to the city, enroll her in the best school, and also employ you as a gateman so you can be close to her." Okonkwo hesitated. The village was his life, but his daughter's dreams tugged at his heart. "Please, Papa, let's go to the city," Amara begged her father. "I know you would love it there." Okonkwo did not want to leave his shop, his customers, or the village, but he knew he would do anything for his daughter. So he sold his shop and moved to Lagos with Amara. Amara couldn't believe her luck. Lagos was nothing like the village. The city was loud, fast, and filled with towering buildings that seemed to touch the sky. Mrs. Eno's mansion was enormous, with polished floors, sparkling chandeliers, and rooms so large that Amara felt lost. "This is your room," Mrs. Eno said, leading her into a spacious bedroom. The bed was covered with silky sheets, and there was a wardrobe filled with new clothes. Amara couldn't believe her eyes. "This is all for me." "Yes," Mrs. Eno said, smiling. "You deserve it." Okonkwo, on the other hand, moved into the gateman's quarters. Though small, it was comfortable. He didn't mind. Seeing Amara's happiness was all that mattered. A few days later, Amara was enrolled in a prestigious private school, where children arrived in expensive cars and wore designer shoes. Contrary to the humble schools she had attended in the village, at first Amara felt out of place among her new classmates who came from wealthy and influential families. However, her determination and intelligence quickly shone through. She felt like a princess in a fairy tale, but she quickly realized that fitting in among the city kids wasn't as easy as she thought. The city wasn't as magical as Amara imagined. Her classmates were rich kids who flaunted their wealth. They carried designer bags, used the latest phones, and spoke of vacations abroad. Amara was smart and kind, but her new classmates weren't. They noticed her accent, her modest shoes, and her unfamiliarity with city life. "Village girl," they whispered, giggling behind her back. During lunchtime at school, Amara pressed her nose against the glass window of Sweet Sensations ice cream parlor, watching her rich classmates eat ice cream and pizza inside. Their shoes sparkled like stars. Their hair was always done in the fanciest styles. Their bags had names like Gucci and Louis Vuitton written on them in gold letters. Inside her pocket, she squeezed the torn 20 naira note her father had given her for lunch. Her own shoes were clean but old. Her hair was neatly plaited but simple, and her bag, well, it was just a plain black bag from the mall. "See you tomorrow, Amara," said Kioma, the richest girl in her class, as she climbed into a big black SUV with tinted windows. "We're having my birthday party at Lekki Cinema on Saturday." Amara's heart sank like a heavy stone in water. She knew there wouldn't be an invitation for her. There never was. Determined to fit in, Amara began imitating them. She adopted their mannerisms, learned to be dismissive of those she considered beneath her, and started coveting the luxury items they flaunted. One day, Amara overheard her classmates discussing a new phone they all had. She wanted it desperately, but knew her father couldn't afford it, so she devised a plan. Amara's transformation didn't go unnoticed. At home, she began demanding more money from her father. "Papa, I need a new phone. My classmates all have the latest ones," she argued, her tone sharp. "Amara," Okonkwo replied gently, "I don't have much. Let's save for your school needs instead." Amara rolled her eyes and stormed off. She felt ashamed when her classmates mocked her outdated phone and simple shoes. To them, appearances were everything, and Amara was desperate to prove she was not a village girl. That evening, as Mrs. Eno counted money from her business, Amara's eyes lingered on the stack of notes. Her heart pounded as she walked beside Mrs. Eno and carefully slipped a few naira bills into her pocket. The next day, she bought the phone, earning her classmates' admiration. Amara's new shoes and accessories didn't go unnoticed at school. "Wow, Amara! You're finally catching up," Anita, the most popular girl, said with a smirk. They began allowing her to sit with them during lunch. For the first time, Amara felt she belonged. "If you keep up with us, we just might invite you places." She loved the attention and popularity and was so encouraged to really level up as the other girls. Amara's theft became a habit. She stole small amounts from Mrs. Eno to buy clothes, shoes, and accessories, anything to make her look like her wealthy classmates. Her confidence grew, but so did her arrogance. One day at school, as Amara was sitting with her new friends, during break time, telling them lies about her father that lives abroad, a voice called over the school speaker. Amara Okonkwo, please come to the office. Someone is here for you. Amara forgot her notebook one morning, and Okonkwo decided to surprise her by bringing it to school. Dressed in an old Ankara shirt and worn-out slippers, he walked into the sparkling hallways of the school. Amara's friends saw him first. "Ew! Who is that fat, ugly man?" one of them asked, wrinkling her nose. Amara's face burned with shame. As Okonkwo approached, smiling and holding out the notebook, she said, "Oh, that's just our gate man." The words hit Okonkwo like a slap as he froze. Tears filled his eyes. He couldn't believe what he just heard. The daughter he had given up so much for, the one suffered to raise from birth, was ashamed of him. After he recovered a little bit from the shock, he handed her the notebook silently. Amara grabbed it and walked away without looking back. The silence that followed was louder than thunder. That evening, when she got home, she couldn't look at her father. Okonkwo confronted Amara. "Why did you do that?" he asked, his voice trembling and tears filling his eyes. "Are you ashamed of me?" "I didn't ask you to be poor," Amara responded, her tone dripping with disdain. For the first time in her life, Amara saw her father cry. He turned away, his shoulders shaking, and walked out of the room. But the worst was coming. With less money, Amara's frustrations grew. She befriended older boys who introduced her to parties. They promised her an escape from her insecurities, but it came at a cost. Her grades began to go down, and her behavior worsened. When Mrs. Eno discovered Amara was skipping school, she scolded her. "Why are you throwing your future away?" she yelled angrily. But Amara, emboldened by her new friends, scoffed. "You are not my mother. Stop controlling me." Mrs. Eno was shocked at her response, but decided to walk away to calm down. She began to notice that her money and jewelry had been missing and complained to Okonkwo. When Okonkwo saw Amara's new iPhone, his heart broke into tiny pieces. "Amara," he said, "where did you get that phone?" I, she stammered. "Have you been stealing from Mrs. Eno?" "Leave me alone. I didn't ask you to be poor. If you were rich, I won't need to steal anything." Amara screamed, running to her room. Her father was shocked beyond words. He couldn't believe his daughter, who was so kind and respectful in the village, could transform into something he didn't recognize. She grew distant from her father, embarrassed by his simple ways. She began looking down on him, the next day at school. The principal announced the yearly most talked about field trip to Ghana. Everyone who was anyone was going on this field trip. The fee was 250,000 naira, more money than her father made in years. When Amara got home, she told her father about the field trip. "Please, Papa," she begged. "Everyone is going." But her father shook his head sadly. "We cannot afford it, Amara. Some things in life are not meant for us." Desperate, Amara went to Mrs. Eno, but she also said no. What Amara didn't know was that her father had already begged Mrs. Eno not to pay for the trip, knowing it would only make things worse and make Amara more entitled. Amara was very angry at Mrs. Eno. She had always given her the things she needed and asked for, but this time Amara was so surprised that she said no. With less money and mounting pressure to maintain her new status, Amara became more defiant. She kept skipping classes to hand out with boys. They smoked, drank, and talked about their rich lives. Amara felt powerful around them, especially when she spun tales about her wealthy family. "My stepmother controls everything," she lied. "She is stopping me from accessing my father's money." Her new friends were intrigued. "Why don't you take control?" one of the boys, Uchi, suggested. "We could help you." Amara laughed nervously, but the idea planted a dangerous seed. Back at school, everyone was talking about the upcoming field trip that was approaching. The students were already talking about their outfits, hairstyle, and the things they would do at the field trip. Amara was sitting quietly listening to them. "Have you paid your money?" Uchechi asked Amara. "No, not yet," Amara responded. "Why?" "If you really want to hang with us, you have to come. This trip separates the wealthy and popular from the rich." Amara, feeling really pressured, began to badmouth Mrs. Eno even more, hoping that one of her rich new friends would pay for her. She told her friends that Mrs. Eno was her stepmother. "She is so wicked. She doesn't give me the money my dad sends to me." She's holding me back, she grumbled. If she wasn't here, I would have everything. Zerania, painting Mrs. Eno as a villain. Her new friend Kunle, a wealthy but reckless boy, was shocked. Then he proposed a solution. If she's blocking your access, let's scare her into releasing the money. The group, led by Uche, proposed a chilling solution. Let's kidnap her and scare her to release the money to you. She will have to give you the money. Amara's stomach churned. Kidnap? That's extreme. Think about it, Amara, Uche pressed. You will get control of your dad's money, and you can do whatever you want to do with it. We won't hurt her. Just scare her. Amara was torn. She knew it was wrong, but the feeling of finally being like her classmates clouded her judgment. Reluctantly, she agreed, thinking it was harmless. So, they devised a plan to kidnap Mrs. Eno and ask for ransom money, then use that money to pay for Amara's field trip. Amara told them when Mrs. Eno would be home, and when the security guard took his break, she showed them how to enter the house and they planned everything. On that horrific evening, she watched from her window as her classmates, carrying a toy gun, pushed her father to the ground and entered the house. She heard Mrs. Eno screaming and begging for her life, her father shouting and doors slamming. The boys robbed Mrs. Eno and hid the money in their pockets, threatened to kill her, and they tied her hands together. But then something happened that wasn't part of the plan. Idemi, the cook, came back from the market earlier than she thought. When she entered the compound, she did not see Okonkwo at the gate, and then she heard the screams from inside the house. She called the police. The police arrived as Kunle and the boys were pushing Mrs. Eno into their car. As the police threatened to shoot them, they surrendered. The police took them to the station where they confessed to Mrs. Eno. We need to charge them to court and send them to prison, the police said. At the station, Amara sat in a cell, trembling. Mrs. Eno was there, her face a mix of fury and disbelief. I took you in like my own child, she said, and this is how you repay me. Amara couldn't meet her eyes. I'm so sorry, Ma, she cried bitterly. Sorry won't fix this, Mrs. Eno snapped. You have betrayed my trust. Okonkwo arrived shortly after, his face pale and stricken. Amara, he whispered, tears brimming in his eyes. What have you done? Amara burst into tears. Papa, I didn't mean for it to go this far. The police were trying to convince Mrs. Eno to charge the kids to court, but Mrs. Eno begged them not to just because of Amara. The parents came to the station to pay a heavy fine for their son's release. Back at the mansion, Okonkwo was summoned. He listened in silence as Mrs. Eno recounted the incident. I trusted you, Amara. You betrayed me. I took you in, gave you a better life, and this is how you repay me. Amara stammered, begging for forgiveness, but Mrs. Eno cut her off. You've become greedy and ungrateful. I want you and your father out of my house this minute. Okonkwo pleaded with her. Please, Ma. She's just a child. Give her another chance. Mrs. Eno shook her head. She's old enough to know better. She almost got me killed. A child who is old enough to think about kidnapping anyone is not a child. She's not the girl I thought she was. Amara cried, but it was too late. The luxurious life she dreamed of was gone. With no other choice, Okonkwo packed their belongings. As they left, Amara looked back at the mansion, tears streaming down her face. She had ruined everything. Returning to Kujia was not just physically humbling for Amara, it was socially painful. Back in the village, their old home, with its leaky roof and cracked walls, felt like a far cry from the luxury they had left behind. Amara struggled to adjust. The small house, the simple meals, and the hard work reminded her of all she had lost. She resented her father, blaming him for their poverty. Okonkwo tried to reconnect with Amara, but her bitterness created a wall between them. The villagers whispered as they passed her on the dusty paths. Isn't that Okonkwo's daughter, the one who thought she was too good for this place? See how she has returned with her tail between her legs, another woman added with a mocking laugh. One day, Amara received a letter from Mrs. Eno. It was filled with disappointment, but also a glimmer of hope. You have potential, Amara. Don't waste it. Learn from this. Amara began reflecting on her actions. She remembered her father's sacrifices and the love Mrs. Eno had shown her. Guilt consumed her. Amara apologized to her father. Papa, I was wrong. I'm sorry for everything. Okonkwo embraced her, tears in his eyes. You're my daughter. I'll always love you. Determined to make amends, Amara helped her father expand his spice business. But even Okonkwo couldn't shield her completely. One afternoon, as Amara tried to sell spices at the market, a former classmate from the village sneered at her. So city life didn't work out, eh? Back to selling peppers. Amara clenched her fists, swallowing the bitter humiliation. I'm just doing what I need to help my father, she replied, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. Each day was a lesson in humility, but Amara resolved to hold her head high. She would not let their words break her. One day, Amara decided to visit Mrs. Eno. Her heart was heavy, but she knew she needed to make things right. She arrived at the grand mansion, her feet hesitant as she approached the gate. The security guard looked surprised but let her in after a call to the house. Mrs. Eno appeared at the door, her arms crossed. Her face was neutral, but her eyes were guarded. What do you want, Amara? Amara dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Ma, I came to apologize. I was selfish and ungrateful. You gave me everything, and I threw it away. Mrs. Eno's lips tightened. Do you know what you almost cost me, Amara? My life, my peace. How can I forgive that? I don't expect you to forgive me, Amara said, her voice trembling. But I need you to know how sorry I am. There was a long silence before Mrs. Eno sighed deeply. You were a foolish girl, Amara, but everyone deserves a chance to learn. I forgive you. Get up. Don't let me see you in my house again. Amara got up and walked out of the compound. As time passed, Amara became more involved in her father's spice trade. She began experimenting with packaging and branding, using ideas she had picked up in Lagos. She suggested creating small sachets of mixed spices that would appeal to city dwellers. Okonkwo was skeptical at first. Who will buy such small quantities? Papa, trust me, people in the city don't have time to grind spices. This will save them time, but Amara explained. They tried her idea, and to their surprise, sales began to pick up. Customers praised the convenience of the neatly packaged spices, and word began to spread. For the first time in months, Okonkwo smiled with pride. Amara, you've brought something new to our trade. Your mother would be proud. Months later, Amara encountered some of her old classmates from Lagos during a market fair in the nearby town. Dressed modestly but confidently, she approached them with her spice stand. One of the girls, Jumani, gasped, Amara, is that you? Amara smiled. Yes, it's me. Jumani looked at the spices, then back at Amara. You're selling this? Amara nodded, unbothered. Yes, it's my family's business. There was an awkward pause before Toke said, Well, at least you're doing something. Amara didn't let the veiled insult bother her. Instead, she handed Toke a sample. Try it. It's the best you'll find. Though the encounter was bittersweet, it reminded Amara how far she'd come. She no longer needed their approval. With Amara's creativity and Okonkwo's expertise, their spice business flourished. They began supplying to stores in nearby towns, and their income grew steadily. Amara became a familiar face at the market, known for her charm and business acumen. One evening, as they sat outside their modest but improved home, Okonkwo looked at Amara with pride. You've turned our struggles into something beautiful. I always knew you had it in you. Amara smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. It's because of you, Papa. You never gave up on me, even when I lost my way. As the moonlight bathed the village, father and daughter reflected on their journey. Amara had learned the value of humility, hard work, and family, and she vowed never to take them for granted again. Amara's journey from arrogance to redemption is a powerful reminder that life's most valuable lessons often come through hardship. Her transformation wasn't just about mending her relationship with her father, but about rediscovering her own worth. The moral of this story is, gratitude and humility pave the way for true success, while arrogance and entitlement lead to downfall. If you like this story the way I did, please like, share with your friends and family, and please subscribe to show your support. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.